Hey everyone, Chris here. Today I'm going to be working on a 1995 Toyota Camry, and it has an issue with the front wheel moving a little bit side to side. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the wheel off, take a look at it, and see what is up. So here's the issue. Now that I have the wheel off, I can pull and push the tie rod. What we're dealing with here is a loose tie rod. And the tie rod comes in two parts. The first is the outer tie rod, and the outer tie rod does not look like it's in the best condition. This should have some more grease in it and should be pumped up, but the boot is not broken. So the outer tie rod may not be in bad shape, but the inner tie rod has the issue because you shouldn't be able to pull it and push it and hear that click. So this is an issue where I'm going to have to replace the inner tie rod, and I might as well go ahead and put a new outer tie rod on it as well. So these are the tools that I think I'm going to need here. Obviously some gloves, a long screwdriver, a breaker bar perhaps. I think that's probably going to be an issue. A pair of needle nose pliers to take the cotter pins out. Our ratchet set, and a hammer. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, after I put on my glove here, is we have to go ahead and pull this castle nut off, and we're going to do that by taking out this cotter pin that's been turned back. I guess actually I can pretty much do it with my hands, but that's what the needle nose pliers are for. So we'll just move that out. Perhaps. Go. So we got that out. Looks like it needs a little bit of help. And then we're going to take this castle nut off so that we can pop out the tie rod. Okay? And that is going to be a lid there. Perhaps 17. That is a 17 millimeter that we'll need for that. And typically the easiest way to do this is put it on your breaker bar. Remember, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, we're taking it off, so we will move it towards us. Oh, that was too easy. You don't need a video for that. So once it is free spinning, just go ahead and pull it off. Just grab it with my ratchets. Now we've got to pop it out, and typically the easiest way to do this is just to smack it with your hammer, and we need to make sure that we're not going to hurt the castle nut. So you can either use a pickle fork like this to pop it out, but if you do that and your outside tie rod is actually good, it'll push all the grease out. If you got one that you can fill back up, that's okay. But if you don't, then what I would recommend, if this is still good, is just turn the castle nut over, because you're going to hit it with your hammer and you need a flat surface here. So we'll just put that back on upside down. Looks like it's got some grit in it. It doesn't want me to move it up all the way, but that's alright, I won't need to. This should pop. Well, that didn't work, so let's go ahead and pull this off. Looks like that wasn't a good idea because the threads have been messed up on my castle nut. So we will have to replace that. That's okay. So here's the suggestion. Don't do it this way. Castle nut actually still works. But I think what we'll do instead is we'll go ahead and use our pickle fork. Alright, that was not the easiest thing in the world to do, but now it is loose, finally, so we can go ahead and take that castle nut off there again. So what I've done here is I've grabbed my channel locks. I don't think this is channel lock brand, Craftsman. Same type of thing, and I'm going to grab right here, tighten this up a bit hopefully. I actually really hate these things. Grab that tie rod so I can keep track of it here. Hopefully it won't spin now, and I'll be able to get the castle nut off. Yeah, we're making progress now. Come on, buddy. Gotta talk to it. Alright, there's the castle nut. Threads are messed up on the cut side. That's right, we'll get a new one. with the outer tie rod. So there it is. That's the outer tie rod. Now, typically, I'll put my other glove back on here. I need some better gloves. Alright, this guy's not supposed to be able to move that easy. There's a cut in the boot, but I think I did that when I was trying to get it off. This is supposed to be really, really firm, and the fact that it's not tells me it could stand to be replaced. But the big issue is this guy right here, that movement. So what we have to do first is we have to take off the outer tie rod. So we're going to put it back in the control arm, like so. And you see this bolt right here? That bolt has to be loosened. That's the bolt that they'll adjust when they're doing an alignment on your car. And this is the piece that makes the alignment. So it's important that we get this outer tie rod to the same location on the new inner tie rod that we're going to put in. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to break this nut loose, and then we're going to count the number of turns it takes to get it off of the outer tie rod. Alright, when we get that off, and we count the number of turns, when we put it back in, we're going to do the same thing except backwards, tightening the number of turns that it took to get it off. So, first thing we'll do, that is too big, and so we'll just grab a crescent wrench. Put it on. Remember, we're righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, so we're going to take it this way. And I might use my hammer and break it loose like that. And you can see that tie rod now is moving on the inside. Alright, that's not what we want to have happen, because we want it to be snug. So, in order to figure out how many turns we've got, we're going to pop it back out again, and then we're going to just simply count it as it's looking down, as the bolt is down. That's 1 turn, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Alright, it's kind of like that, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll, right? So 16 turns. I want to make sure I write that down. So 16 turns. There we go. Now it's going to be different on yours, so you got to make sure you count the turns. Next thing we have to do, as we're looking back in here, so there's a boot that you can see back in here. That boot has to come off because we're going to use that boot again. Now it has 2 clamps on it. One here that's just a pressure clamp that you can see. We'll just pull that one off pretty simply, hopefully, with our needle nose pliers. So you just grab it and squeeze it and pull it out. And then the second one, now there's a trick to this. This will stay stuck pretty well. And what we'll actually do with this is we'll take our screwdriver and we're going to put it up in here like so, kind of break that loose, but not enough that it breaks the boot, so you have to be careful about that. You may consider wanting to spray some WD-40 in there to get it to move a little bit. Let me see. So this actually moves for me, so I'm okay with that. I don't need the WD-40, but there's a second one in the back. And let me see if I can get my other flashlight back in there. And hopefully you can see this. There is another one that is one of those, it's a one that is just usable one time. So hopefully you can see that. And I already did this part, but you got to get your screwdriver into this area right here and just turn your screwdriver and it'll pop it loose. So that will allow you to pull this off. Now when you replace this boot, one of the easier things to do is to just use a zip tie back here, because it's kind of hard to find these guys. Zip ties work really well. Just go ahead and pull the boot off now at this point. Alright, so I removed the boot. Here's the boot. And it is nasty inside, and I will clean that out. You can't really see that very much. But there's a lot of liquid and grime in there. I'm not sure why that is, but I'll try to clean that out a little bit. And what we've got now, in order to get the boot off, by the way, I had to take off the bolt that was here that you adjust for your alignment. So I had to take that off, and then I slid the clamp off, and we're good there. And this was the other side, the clamp that went on the other side of the boot. Now, I might actually be able to use this again, but as I said earlier, I think I'm better off to use a zip tie on the back side of it. It doesn't have to hold a lot of pressure. It just needs to kind of, keep the liquid out. So that's what I will do. Now what we've got here is our tie rod, not to be confused with tie rod Taylor. And that tie rod has to come off. Now, in order to get the tie rod off, like I mentioned before, you're going to use a special tool that they have. You can just get this from the loaner program at AutoZone or wherever you buy your car parts. This is an adapter, and this guy right here is the tool. So if you go in and you borrow the tool from AutoZone, you say, I need the tie rod tool, they'll say okay, and they'll look on the little diagram, and this will be the tool that they'll show you. But please don't leave without telling them you also need the adapter, and the adapter comes in several different sizes, so make sure you pull your tie rod, your new one, out, and make sure this fits on it so you've got the right tie rod tool. Alright? Now, in order to put this on, I just have to reach back in here, straighten out the tie rod itself, and then kind of move it around until I get the flat side of the tie rod. Hopefully we can do it. Alright, no worries, we're back. Okay, so I fitted this on here. Hopefully you can see that. It goes on sideways. And then you take the tool. I'm going to slide this back here. You slide it over the tie rod and onto the adapter, like so. Got it? Alright, next thing I have to do is I have to put my ratchet on it. There we go. There we go. Righty tighty, lefty loosey, we're going that way. Hopefully. Maybe I'll use my hammer. Maybe I'll change the direction a little bit so I can get my hammer on it. This goes around here pretty good. Just gotta make sure it's staying on. People don't use their brake dust cover as leverage. And gonna have to make an adjustment here. Breaker bar. Need a little bit more leverage. There we go. So I'll put the ratchet back on again. Hopefully we can make some headway with that. There we go. Now, people say that you can do this with, get these inner tie rods off without this tie rod tool, but I don't have a clue how they would actually make that happen, because they're on there pretty tight. and you need to be able to catch the edge like that. So there's the old one. See how it spins around like that? By the way, that's not supposed to happen. So here's the new one. And if you notice, I can't even move this thing with my hands. You really can't move it without it being in the car. So obviously there's a problem there with the old one. And now it's time to put the new one in. This little guy right here, this is the locking mechanism. So make sure your new one has one of these. And what you're going to end up doing with it is putting it in, and this will keep everything locked in properly when you bend the edge of this clip over onto the flat side of the tie rod. So it looks like that actually wasn't done very well. So we'll work on that. Okay, so here's the deal. That is what the tie rod, the inner tie rod, needs to connect to. Right there. I don't know if you can see that. But there are little grooves in it right here and right here. Those are my grooves. Okay? Now the reason those grooves are there is so that you can attach this guy, and you can see that there's little pieces that are standing up there. Those pieces actually need to go in those grooves like so. Okay? Now eventually, after we get this tightened on, what we'll do is we'll bend the back side, or bend this washer back over the edges of the tie rod so that it won't turn, unless you've got a wrench on it and you can, bust it through. But normal movement won't allow it to slip if you do that. So that is the objective, the next objective. So I'll move this back out. Hopefully you can still see what I'm doing. Right there. And I'm going to put it on the tie rod like so. So with the little pointy pieces pointing away from the threads. And then move it in, line it up, make sure that the pieces that are on your washer are in the grooves. And this is going to be kind of a pain to get started here because I can't angle it. Actually, I probably could if I got my vise on it. There we go. Kind of got moving now. There, now I can adjust it and make it easier to get in there. Like so. Get this bolt off. So that's what we got going right now. Make sure that the washer is in place so it doesn't move. And then when we get to the point where I can't turn it by hand anymore, we'll go ahead and get the tool on it, the tie rod tool. It looks like that's about it. Nope, no more. Like that. So now what I will do is I'll get my adapter and put it on like so. That's a lot easier. And we will put the actual tool on here so I can tighten it with my ratchet. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. We're on pretty tight. Back the tool off. back the adapter off. Looks like we're in place right now. So the question is, how are we going to get this guy, the edge of the washer, bent back over? Okay, so I played a little unfair, and the issue that I had back in here was trying to get, got that other piece? Yeah. Trying to get this piece right here. I bent it. Here's the old one. Basically, it has to sit like this, except obviously it's flat. So these little edge pieces here have to go in the groove that I showed you before. So what you have to end up doing somehow is folding the edge of this washer over these flat spots. Now there's not a lot of room to work with, so what I ended up doing was I took my crescent wrench, whatever you want to call this. This isn't a crescent wrench, but my pliers here, and I grabbed them like this. Hopefully you can see that. And I pulled the edge so that it kind of moved a little bit, and I was able to get done what needed to be done. So let me see if I can go in there and show you how it looks. If you're not getting seasick. But hopefully you can see that in there. It's, you know, right there where my finger's pointing to. And then there's another one on the other side as well that I can't really show you. But I bent them over a little bit so they should be able to hold snugly. It doesn't take a lot of pressure because that's not something that's spinning. It's just moving back and forth, and you just don't have to have a lot of pressure on it to keep it in place. All right, so that's there. So that means the inner tie rod is in place. Now the next thing that we have to do is we're going to have to put on our boot. So I want to make sure that that gets cleaned out a little, and then we got to make sure that we get a good size zip tie on the back here to hold it in place. So that is the next. So I got a zip tie. It's nothing incredible, but that should be enough to hold it in place. So I'm going to slide it back in here. I've already cleaned out a little bit. Make sure that you hold on to the zip tie so that you can get a good grip on it. I'm going to push this back in there a little bit over this knuckle. There's a knuckle right here. Extend it so that it's in the right place. I'm just kind of moving it back there for feel, and then I'm going to tighten up the zip tie. But I got to use two hands to do it. And so the next thing that we have to do is we have to put on the clamp on the front side of the boot. Now keep in mind, if the boot is broken, then you're going to have to replace the boot. We are fortunate enough not to have that be the case. So I'm just going to tighten this guy up, move it over the rubber. Hopefully we can get it in there. Like so. The hands of a surgeon. Not really. Alright, so the inner tie rod is in place and we are looking good. Now what we have to do is we have to put the outer tie rod on. So the first thing that we're going to have to do here on this outer tie rod is a little different lighting here. Got to put the bolt on. This is the tightening bolt that they use to adjust the alignment, right? And we're going to put this on pretty far back on the spindle. Let's see if I can get this light out of the way so you can see what we're doing, but not get blinded. Okay. So we'll tighten this up, take it back a ways, so it's out of the way. And remember, we have to put the outer tie rod on with the 16, it was 16, I wrote it down, 16 turns so that it's the same distance. And you know, it's a good idea to go ahead and get an alignment done after you do this, but if you turn it the same amount of turns that it took to get it off, at least it'll be drivable and you'll be alright. So the new outer tie rod came with a new crown bolt, which is good because I kind of messed up the last one. It had another bolt for the outer tie rod, but we won't need to use that because we've already got one on there. We just put that on, and it's got a new cotter pin. And this one has a zert that goes on top where we can fill up the grease, which is really nice because the last one I had did not have that. So we'll install that as well. But at this point, all we have to do really is, starting downward, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 licks to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pop. Okay, so now that that's in place, what I need to do is I need to get this, the tie rod, into the control arm. I guess that's not actually the control arm, but the steering knuckle here. Like so. And when I get it in the right place, I have to do a little moving around a little bit. There we go. I just kind of slid the brake caliper, the steering knuckle out so I could drop this down in a little better. And we'll put the crown bolt on just to kind of keep it in place for now, and tighten that up. Oh, wrong side. So the last crown bolt was a 17, and this is actually a 19. So we'll roll with it. Tighten that up. And we really just need to tighten it to the point where we can get the cotter pin in between the slots in the crown bolt. I think that should do it. And then we can fill this guy. Alright, lost my battery, so I don't know how much of that you missed. But anyway, what we're doing here is we're just going to tighten this guy up. Since we've already done our 16 turns here, we know that's in the right place. We've got our crown nut on, so that's good. Now we just have to put in our cotter pin. We'll get that. And just going to tighten this up if I can figure out. There we go. Do it by hand first. Didn't like that. Okay, so that's on there pretty tight, and I think what I want to do, since this kind of adjusted, it's turned a bit. What I want to do is grab my vice grips and turn this back a little bit, like so. So it's at a better angle. And then what I need to do is find the hole where the cotter pin. Okay, so we're good, and here is the cotter pin, Mr. Cotter. I'm just going to slide it in through here, hopefully, there we go, like so, and use my needle nose pliers. Let's turn it around. Should probably actually turn it more around the crown bolt itself instead of underneath. There we go. And that bolt should not move now. Last step before we put the wheel back on is to put the zert on the top and fill it up. Okay, so I put the zerk in. I've been calling it a zert. I guess it's a zerk. And all I'm going to do is take my grease gun and put it on there. And should see that bladder inflate with grease. I think there's a little bit going in there now. Yeah, I think we're looking good. All right. That, my friends, is the end of replacing the inner and outer tie rods on a 1995 Toyota Camry.